Imagine coming back to see your most prized possession trashed and destroyed. That was exactly what happened to Malcolm Rivers, a black man who had worked his whole life for the one car he treasured above anything else, a crimson red Lamborghini Huracan. Instead of admiring it in his garage, Malcolm stood frozen as he stared at the wreckage. Metal twisted around a telephone pole, airbags burst, a wheel torn clean off. It looked less like a car and more like the aftermath of an explosion. The worst part? This wasn't the result of some random theft. It wasn't an accident caused by a stranger. The person behind the wheel was Josh Whitmore, 17 years old, cocky, reckless, and the son of Susan Whitmore, the neighborhood HOA president. Susan had already made it her mission to remind everyone in Oakwood Valley that she was in charge. And now her son had broken into Malcolm's locked garage, stolen the valet key, and taken his Lamborghini for a legendary joyride. That's where the nightmare started. Malcolm was out of town at the time when his phone rang at 2 a.m. His neighbor, Mr. Douglas, spoke with a shaky voice. "Malcolm, you need to come back. There's been an accident with your car." The words made his stomach twist. He didn't even hear the rest. He just packed his things and drove home in a fog of dread. By the time Malcolm pulled into Oakwood Valley, it was too late. His dream car was gone, reduced to a pile of gleaming scraps. Standing at the scene was Sergeant Harris, who explained exactly what had happened. Josh and his friends had been seen fishtailing through residential streets, pushing the Lamborghini like it was a toy, until physics caught up with them. Miraculously, they all survived with only cuts and bruises. Malcolm's Lamborghini, though, was totaled. For a moment, anger mixed with relief. At least the police had Josh. At least justice would finally be served. But then Malcolm remembered reality. Josh wasn't just any kid. He was the spoiled son of Susan Whitmore, the HOA president who had always had it out for him. And Malcolm knew Susan wasn't the type to apologize. She was the type to twist the story, shift the blame, and try to bury her son's crime under her influence. A few hours after the crash, Malcolm heard the inevitable knock on his front door. Standing there was Susan herself, dragging her weary-looking husband along like backup. She was dressed sharp, stiff blouse and pearls, the kind of outfit meant to project authority. But Malcolm already knew she hadn't come to apologize. "Mr. Rivers," she began curtly, "we need to discuss this unfortunate incident." Malcolm, who had just lost his most valued possession, almost laughed at her choice of words. "Unfortunate incident? Your son broke into my garage, stole my Lamborghini, and destroyed it. That's grand theft auto, Susan." She waved her hand like she was brushing crumbs off a counter. "Let's not exaggerate. Josh made a youthful mistake. He wasn't stealing, he was borrowing." Malcolm's blood boiled. Borrowing? He broke in. He had no permission. He wrecked a $300,000 car. Her tone dropped lower, almost conspiratorial. "The police are overreacting. Josh is a good boy, and frankly, if you insist on keeping such a flashy vehicle in a quiet neighborhood, you should expect problems. It's practically an attractive nuisance." Have you ever had a neighbor try to twist the blame back on you? Like you were the problem when you were the victim? What would you do if someone's kid destroyed your property and their parent demanded you cover it up? Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from right now? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where our viewers are tuning in from. And if you believe arrogance and corruption should always be exposed, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc for stories that put bullies in their place. Malcolm's jaw tightened. "So let me get this straight. Your son steals my Lamborghini, totals it, and you want me to pretend it was nothing?" Her lips curved into a smug smile. "Exactly. Think of it as community harmony. Cover the damages with your insurance, maybe even tell the police you lent it to him so his future isn't ruined. That would be the neighborly thing to do." Malcolm's voice turned cold. "You want me to pay for the damage and lie to law enforcement? That's obstruction of justice, Susan. Suggest that again, and you'll find yourself facing even more charges." Her face twisted with rage. She hissed that Malcolm was the real problem in the neighborhood and stormed off, her husband trailing behind like a shadow. Malcolm knew then this wasn't over. It was war. He immediately called his insurance company. To their credit, they were professional, assured him theft was covered, and promised to go after Josh's family for restitution. Then he called his attorney, Naomi Blake, a sharp legal fighter known for tearing apart cases like a gladiator in the courtroom. After hearing the details, she chuckled darkly. Attractive nuisance? A locked Lamborghini? This woman's digging her own grave. Document everything, Malcolm. Every note, every violation, every word. And Malcolm did exactly that. The retaliation began almost immediately. Within a week, Malcolm started receiving one HOA violation notice after another. First, Susan claimed his lawn was overgrown. Then his mailbox was faded. Next, she alleged a stone in his driveway was the wrong shade. Each letter was more absurd than the last, and every single one carried her signature. But Malcolm followed Naomi's advice. He documented everything, photos with timestamps, detailed responses, and letters drafted with Naomi's guidance, pointing out how every citation was retaliatory, especially in light of her son's theft. And Malcolm wasn't alone. Neighbors began speaking up once they realized he wasn't backing down. Mrs. Patel revealed Susan had forced her to repaint her front door 3 separate times because it wasn't the right shade of blue. Another neighbor shared how his request for solar panels was denied after Susan's brother-in-law lost his roofing contract. Story after story surfaced, painting a clear picture. Susan wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was abusing her HOA power like a personal weapon. Meanwhile, Josh showed zero remorse. Instead of keeping quiet, he bragged online. Screenshots surfaced of him posting, "About to do something legendary," just before the theft. His friends hyped him up in the comments, proof that he had planned it like a stunt. Naomi made sure all of it was archived. "This kid is handing us the case on a silver platter," she told Malcolm. As the weeks passed, the stage was set for the annual HOA meeting. Normally, it was a dull event where a handful of people showed up to hear about landscaping budgets and property values. But this year, the clubhouse was packed. Malcolm could feel the tension as Susan strutted in with her board members, trying to look confident but showing cracks beneath the surface. She launched into her usual speech about protecting property values and maintaining community standards, but the mood had shifted. People weren't buying it anymore. When she finally opened the floor, Naomi rose with calm precision. She laid out the evidence, the retaliatory fines, the harassment, the archived posts, and even hints that Susan had known about Josh's plan before it happened. Gasps rippled through the room. Susan sputtered, calling it all lies. That's when Malcolm stood up and told the truth. After her son stole his Lamborghini, Susan had demanded he lie to police and cover the damages himself. Murmurs spread across the clubhouse. Neighbors leaned toward one another, whispering angrily, and just when the tension felt like it couldn't stretch any further, the doors swung open. Sergeant Harris walked in, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. He didn't hesitate. He marched straight up to Susan, his voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Ma'am, we have a warrant for your arrest, obstruction of justice, witness tampering, and potential accessory after the fact." You could have heard a pin drop. Susan's jaw fell open. "This is outrageous," she shrieked, her voice bouncing off the clubhouse walls. "This is a conspiracy." But the officers didn't flinch. They cuffed her right there in front of everyone she had bullied for years. No one rushed to defend her. Her board members sat frozen. Her husband slumped in his chair like the life had drained out of him. The queen of the HOA was being dragged out in handcuffs, her reign ending not with applause but with stunned silence. Then, almost as if a weight had been lifted, the room exhaled. Relief rippled through the neighbors, whispers, then conversations, then a flood of voices. For the first time in years, people began openly discussing real reform, audits, new leadership, and ways to turn the HOA back into what it was supposed to be. And the cracks in Susan's empire didn't stop there. The audit that followed revealed even more: misused HOA funds, charges for personal dinners, expensive gifts, and even maintenance for her beloved Range Rover. The very vehicle she used to parade around the neighborhood was being paid for with community money. The revelations stacked on top of the existing charges, adding embezzlement to Susan's growing list of crimes. As for Josh, his so-called legendary joyride ended with more than just a wrecked Lamborghini. Juvenile detention, probation, and community service became his reality. The bravado vanished, replaced with humiliation. Their family's polished image shattered overnight. Susan's husband eventually filed for divorce, cutting ties with the mess she had created. The Range Rover? Gone. The pearls? pawned. The control she wielded with an iron fist, stripped away. Susan, once the untouchable ruler of Oakwood Valley, was reduced to nothing more than a disgraced figure, working retail in another town, her crown permanently broken. Malcolm, though still grieving the loss of his Lamborghini, refused to let Susan's war destroy him. His insurance came through, and he replaced the crimson red Huracan with a Porsche 911 Turbo S. It wasn't as loud or flashy, but it carried its own quiet strength and didn't attract the same kind of target his Lamborghini had. More importantly, the neighborhood itself transformed. Without Susan breathing down their necks, people finally relaxed. If you believe entitled neighbors like Susan and her son deserve to be humbled, smash that like button and subscribe to Story Arc because bullies only win when you stay silent.